Welcome in to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Landry, and in today's show, I have an interview with the founder of Mothers Against Greg Abbott / Moms for Democracy PAC, Nancy Thompson. That will come later. But before then, I analyze again, but fully, the leadership of Democratic Caucus Chair Gene Wu in the 89th legislative session. But first is the tragic flood that has killed over 100 people in the hill country city of Kerrville down in Kerr County. Folks, this is just awful. You know, your heart aches for this tragedy, and I'm sure you've heard many reports about this, and there's pictures of the damaged campgrounds and just unprecedented flooding within a matter of hours. And I keep coming back to one word, and that being tragic. And I can't think of another word to really use that can really fit the description for this moment. Kerr County Judge Rob Kelly told the media recently that they don't have a warning system, and when pushed on why more precautions weren't taken, Kelly said that no one knew this kind of flood was coming. Judge Kelly hit the nail on the head. There is no warning system. And the one who highlighted this was Suzanne Bell-Snyder, and she has a Substack publication to which I subscribe called the Texas Rural Reporter. And she made this point in a recent article, and just a quote from it, one of the bills, which was known as House Bill 13, would have established what was called the Texas Interoperability Council, which would have been responsible for developing, coordinating, and governing emergency communications equipment and infrastructure statewide, and administering grants to assist local governments in acquiring emergency communications and expanding their emergency communications infrastructure. HB 13 passed the House overwhelmingly, but it ended up dying in the Texas Senate without ever receiving a hearing. Okay, a handful of legislators in the House voted against HB 13, and one was Representative Wes Verdell, District 52, who represents Kerr County. Okay, and as we know, this is ground zero for this tragedy, and this bill would have provided funding to counties like Kerr and to purchase sirens or other emergency alert equipment, which might have provided the warning the communities needed to avoid the massive loss of lives. And end quote from Bell-Snyder. In a press conference, Governor Greg Abbott suggested that this issue would be put on the call in the upcoming special session. Let's remember, Governor Abbott called a special session at once he vetoed Senate Bill 3, which banned THC throughout the state of Texas. And he then said there'll be a special session on July 21st. So in this upcoming special session, Governor Abbott said in a press conference that something like HB 13, this sort of emergency system that would do the things that I said earlier, could possibly be on the call. And so let's all hope that it is, and that let's hope it's one of the first items to pass. And this is something that should really pass unanimously. I mean, we're really hoping for 150 to nothing, and 150 to nothing in the House, and 31 to nothing in the Senate. But as usual, there's always these sets of people in the House who have weird priorities, and I'm not going to get into who those people are. You can very much guess who they are. They always love to cause problems. They would rather be the noisy symbol than to actually be in tune with things, but that's their personality. But I do want to mention one thing here about this ongoing tragedy down in the hill country. One commentator said earlier in the week that what this proves is that we don't have any control over anything, and that everything is religious. I don't necessarily disagree with everything about that, but what I'm here to say is, come on, please. First things first, the person who said that is one of the meanest spirited people in all of West Texas. And believe me, I know this. And so to have that kind of sentiment in this moment cannot be any more tone deaf to the situation. And so it's quite clear that what this person wants to do is to take the spotlight and try to come up with something clever as opposed to trying to be helpful in this sense of tragedy. And you just have to say, well, that's just who he is. All right? There's lots of words that I'd like to use to describe him, but I won't. But there is one that I'll say. What a maroon. That aside, reasonable people will have their thoughts with these families during this terrible time. And by the time you're listening to this and you get this recording, I'm sure there'll be many places for people to donate to relief efforts, and we're all encouraged to do that. And that's very charitable causes out there working tirelessly to make sure that people get what they need. I mean, this is just an awful time, and it just makes you just wonder, about the Guadalupe River, about what kind of efforts can be done to make sure I don't want to say stop, but to help prevent these sorts of flash flood efforts again. But just a terrible time for those families, and all of our thoughts are with them. I do want to switch gears here to something much more into what I'm into, probably better at, and that's giving some sort of a fair analysis of the 89th regular session. And this is the time to really do it. If you do it right after the session, you can't really see things with clear eyes. So you have to wait, but you can't wait too long. So there's a window. And so you have to wait, you have to get your thoughts collected and truly parse them out to where you can formulate a fair evaluation as to what took place for those 140 days in 2025. So that said, how was the 89th regular session? Well, obviously this answer, it depends whom you ask. All right, so for conservative Texans, this was a really good session. All right, the governor got something that he literally fought for. I mean, he went after people, he went after those in the Republican primary who voted against his school voucher bills in 2023, in the regular session, and in the several special sessions thereafter. And he got the legislature that he wanted. So there's no, this was a key thing. This was Project One. And he got that in this session. Not a lot of hay made about it. There wasn't the big fight. There's only a couple of Republicans who voted against that in the Texas House. Right? It passed fairly easily in the Texas Senate. And it passed early in the Texas Senate. Interesting, though, is that the governor got this, and that was his big thing. But there's also something that happened that was, not exactly a conservative or liberal, Republican, Democratic thing here, and that was water infrastructure. I mean, you've heard me say this before. You've seen me write this in other publications, is that, water doesn't care what your political party is or what your political ideology is. All right? Water couldn't give a flying flip if we don't have I mean, it's a matter of life and death. So if we don't have water in this part of the state, or even in this state, we have a tremendous amount of problems. So a water infrastructure funding gets passed. We'll actually vote on that later this year in November, about the money and other aspects that were passed throughout the session. That's actually really good. We also got another round of property tax relief that we'll also vote on later in this year in November. Okay. What everyone has to realize here is that we can extend the homestead exemption as long as we want, and we're not ever going to get real on property tax relief until two things happen. One is if they finally fund public education the way that it needs to be funded. Okay. And the other way is they deal with appraisal creep and home insurance creep. I mean, they could make homestead exemption be almost like 100%. They can make homestead exemptions as much as they want. They can cut down on how much local entities can tax, and they can lower that ceiling as much as they want. None of that's going to matter unless they deal with the other multipliers, and that is appraisal creep, and that is home insurance creep. All right, I mean, you can probably guess I don't really agree with a lot of what the majority in the legislature does, but I emailed my own state representative, who I have a fairly decent relationship with. I mean, he and I get along fairly well. There's a mutual respect there. I don't have terrible, awful things to say about him. But what I will say is this: I emailed him and said, "Hey, can you insurance creep, home insurance premium creep is a big problem," and he said, "Yes, it is." And he goes, "I think there might be something that can be done about it." I don't know if there was. You would think something like that would have gotten a lot of attention, because when you pass something that is that big of a deal, you'd want to make people know about it. And I didn't hear much about that. So they're going to continue to do with the outer space thing of homestead exemptions, which is good. I mean, okay, fine, we can deal with that. But you easily get away from that when the other factors, come in and just eat up the entire relief that was given. And so those are the two things that have to be done. And the other big thing for conservative Texans that they really, really liked was Lieutenant Governor Patrick continued his war on higher education. This all stems from a couple of things, but one primarily that happened over 2 years ago, actually 2 years ago this summer, was when he got criticized at a guest lecture, and because of his policies, and therefore he gets very upset, and he went after faculty senates. This is like, you're getting mad at something that doesn't matter. Does he want to go and shake his fist at the sky because it's too hot? I mean, old man yells at cloud. I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, you're trying to kill a fly with a bazooka. It's complete overkill. Faculty senates are not unions. And Texas is a right to work state. So you just have to laugh and go, what is this? And then this whole thing about how there has to be more oversight on what professors can teach. And I mean, a friend of mine retired a few years ago, and he called it. He said, "Look, the overreach that we see at the K through 12 level will one day happen in the higher education level. And academic freedom is, will one day be on the chopping block. And so you just have to wonder here, what? Yeah, but you just have to laugh and go, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're doing all this tremendous amount of reform on something that doesn't matter. But I went down a sidetrack there. I apologize, but I digress. But besides all that, this was good for conservative Texans. They got a lot of wins in this session. I think the notable loss was the THC ban that later got vetoed by Governor Abbott, and then he calls a special session essentially wanting to regulate it. We'll see how that works out. Patrick has kind of made this issue either his San Jacinto or his Alamo. He said, I will not ever want to regulate marijuana. And then he said, infamously said in that press conference, if people want me to lose the seat over this, then so be it. A lot of Texans go, dude, you've already made the sell. Don't oversell it. You already got me. But let's understand here that while it was good for conservative Texans, this session for Democrats and those who lean left, it was awful. The session was truly the pits. And the guy who House Democrats helped elect as House Speaker did exactly what every other Texas observer knew he would do. All right. Lubbock State Representative Dustin Burrows is going, he wins the gavel here, and he gets a lot of support from House Democrats. And I don't know what the conversations were in the room. I wasn't in the room where it happened. Neat little Hamilton reference there. I wasn't in there. And only those who know. And it seems like those who know don't want to really talk about it. And that's fine. I'm not asking them to or anything. But I'm going to give you some excerpts from an interview that the leader of the House Democratic Caucus gave to the Texas Observer, and it's going to leave you with some ideas that maybe he wasn't sold the right bag of goods. But it seems to me that since everyone knew that, you have to know who that lawmaker is, and there's nothing short about now Speaker Burrows being a conservative. Nothing short of that. So we all knew what he was going to do. His leadership style is different than Patrick. He is different than Dade Phelan, different than Dennis Bonnen. But it seemed like everyone knew what he was going to do, except for the Democrats in the Texas House. Not least of those was Caucus Chair Gene Wu, who's from the Houston area. And so what we have to say is this. I just have to call it. You just have to call it what it is. I don't know what he thought. I don't know what he was thinking at that moment. I don't know what he was promised. But from everything that we have seen from him, it suggests, and everything we've read from him, it suggests that he got bamboozled. And as I've stated this prior, he had a real opportunity to use this speaker vote to show that the Democrats, that the party out of power, could actually be something in this session. And in previous episodes of this podcast, you've heard me to where I played for you a part of an interview where he said, "Well, yeah, I think we will get a chair." And then when they vote for the House rules, he goes, "Well, we knew we wouldn't get a chair. I knew we wasn't going to do that, and we just gotta, do the best we can." and then we got to get the majority and let them face the rules that they made. Just like, come on, dude. What in the world are you doing? You had an opportunity to actually sit at the grown-ups table, but you said, you know what? This is a too big chair for me. I think I like what's happening at the kids' table. And that's where he is. He showed that he was interested in hoping that this legislature now was like what it was when he first came in. That it was like the mid-2000s all the way up until about 10 years ago. And much to his and House Democrats' chagrin, it isn't. And Caucus Chair Wu was simply naive to buy into that. And he did a post-game interview, a post-session interview with the liberal bent publication called the Texas Observer. And he's asked some very pointed questions. But his defensive shields are without question are up. And I just want to show you, or I just want to highlight a couple of excerpts here, because it's important to know what I mean whenever I say that his defensive shields were up. So one of the questions he's asked here is about the speaker's vote, and the one who wrote this is let me see, is it Justin Miller? I want to say that it is. And so he's going to do a really good interview here with Caucus Chair Wu. And what's interesting here is that you're going to see somebody who should have good answers. He doesn't. So he's asked first thing here about the speakers, and this is Miller's question. One of the first moves by much of the caucus was to decide to get behind Dustin Burrows in the open speaker fight. Looking back on that, do you think that was the right strategy? And this is Wu. He goes, yes, of course. Tell me what other sensible strategy was, what the other sensible strategy was. There were only three possible pathways. The pathway that ended with a Democratic Speaker of the House was unlikely, unviable, and irrational. There's no numbers, no reality where that works. The other pathway was choose somebody who has promised to be even worse and who is allied with the worst actors. And with Burrows, at least his allies were people who were at least tolerable to us. So given how things turned out and knowing what I know today, would I have made a different choice? I'm not sure I could have made a different choice. What other choices were there? Okay, I'm so glad he ended that particular statement with a question, because I have the answer for you, buddy. The answer is this. You don't give it up. That's the answer. And this is what I've been trying to say to you and to others for a very long time, is that you knew that the rules were being changed. You knew how this thing ended. If you were even an average chess player, you know how the moves end out. If you played the game to the end, you know how this goes. And let's also know this. There were many reports out there, and even examples of this, published by Burrows people, that David Cook, who was the other person vying to be the Republican House Speaker in this session, was sending emails to Democrats saying, I will make you a chair. And he was promising these sorts of things. Burrows never said any of that. He said that there will be a vote. And to his credit, there was a vote. But to the weird part is that Democrats voted for that. So that's the other key thing here. So those were your choices, dude. You could have said, you know what? We're going to unite ourselves around our own candidate. And we are going to stay united behind our one candidate. And the ones who have changed everything is the House Republicans. They have changed this entire attitude. They've changed it. You could have blamed it all on them. But he kept thinking it was, 2009. He kept thinking it was 2011, even 2013. Crazy. And then he's asked this question. Miller asked him, do you think Democrats could have stood united in withholding support for longer in order to try to secure actual concessions? Let me rephrase that question here. Do you think Democrats could have stood united in withholding support for longer in order to try to secure actual concessions? Meaning, could you have tried harder? And this is Wu's answer. Is it possible? Of course, anything's possible. I could suddenly turn into a fish. It's within the realm of possibility. See, this is why Gene Wu is not a good leader. That right there. This is why he probably couldn't lead a troop of Boy Scouts out of a paper bag. This right here is just highlights to you what he's more interested in. And he's later asked here about how, how was his session? And when he's asked this question, how would you grade the performance? And this is how out of touch he is. He goes, in terms of actual results, probably a B minus. What? He goes on to say here, there's just only so much we can do in terms of actual results, actual ability to stop these things. These are all quotes from the interview here. We can only play the hand that we're dealt with. We can only play the hand that we're dealt. And what we were dealt with was a hand where the public took 2 seats away from us, meaning the 2024 election. And we had to accomplish basically everything that we've accomplished in the past 2 cycles, but with less power. And he lists a few things they were able to stop and weaken. And that's the position that they were in. So he goes, well, in that terms, we did pretty good, I guess. You lose all hand. You lose your entire credibility at the very beginning of this when you were bamboozled. And he goes on to even say that he possibly was. Like, for instance here, he's asked the question, do you think Speaker Burrows acted in good faith in how he dealt with Democrats through this session? And this is Wu's answer. I will refrain from giving my personal account because I think some of the stuff that was promised to me, that's different. But I think the overall feeling from the membership is that many promises were not kept. And I'm not saying that as like promises were broken to me, but I think the overall consensus of the membership is that many, many deals were not kept. And then Miller asks him to give an example. Like, that's legit the question. Can you give an example or 2 of specific promises? And Wu says, I will not. Okay, so you say we got snowed. Okay, what were some of those examples? Well, I'm not going to tell you. What are you afraid of? Like, legit, what is it of which you are afraid? Why are you scared? I don't understand. Because this sort of mentality, when you're already in the minority, what do you have to lose? But again, as I've stated before, as I've mentioned this several times, he gave it all up when he refused to stand behind the Democratic nominee for House Speaker and say, it's the Texas Republicans who messed all this up. You want to blame somebody, blame them. He just didn't have the will, didn't have the force, didn't have the mindset to do something like that. And so it's clear to me and anyone else who read that interview and has followed Chairman Wu, Caucus Chair Wu, that he's just better as a social media troll than an actual party leader. He's more into these gotchas. That's where that whole fish comparison was. Well, sure, anything. I can turn into a fish. Okay, that's the dumbest. He's more into these gotcha things than actually trying to empower. Okay? And at worst, and that's what he is at best. At worst, he's just simply naive. If Caucus Chair Wu wants to get serious, this will be his only term as Caucus Chair. His ship for serious leadership has sailed. And unfortunately for him and the rest of the Democratic side, none of them were on it. And I think there needs to be some soul searching in the Democratic caucus, either after the 2026 midterms or even during the special session or whatever the case is. They need to do some serious soul searching and ask themselves, is Wu the guy that we want to have for another term? I think their best bet of leadership was with TMF, Trey Martinez Fisher. I don't know why you'd want to change somebody who has established leadership and was able to do good things here, but I don't know. But I think the day after the 2026 election, Democrats are going to have to really do some soul searching in the Texas House and ask themselves, can we still have this guy be the leader? Because what other way can he help us get snowed? And that's the question that they have to ask themselves. What they really should ask is, we're tired of being in the minority. Why don't we help fund some candidates in other areas of the state and possibly challenge certain people and possibly help get more momentum in later elections to possibly get rid of them? There's a thought. But that's a whole other side story. Right? That's a whole other side story. Perhaps, if the new Democratic State Party chair, I don't know what kind of influence he could have over Chair Wu, but you have to ask yourself, maybe they should have a conversation. That may be something that may be worth having. Okay, now, I want to share with you the interview that I had with Nancy Thompson, who is the founder of Mothers Against Greg Abbott, Moms for Democracy. She is delightful. It was a great conversation, and so I will play that for you right now. All right, and with me here is the founder of Mothers Against Greg Abbott, Mothers for Democracy, is Nancy Thompson. Nancy, thank you so much for being on the Outsider podcast with me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure to have guests on here. And you've been very active here in Texas politics and even federally. So just give us a background about this particular group, why you started it, and what your goals are.
Well, it kind of started by accident. What happened was that I was really unhappy with Greg Abbott's policies during COVID when he did away with the mask requirement for kids in schools. I had a son who was in the emergency room and he was really sick. And I just didn't want to send him to school without a mask on, and I didn't want him to be exposed. And the doctor in the emergency room told me, you really need to be careful sending him back to school because school was about to start. And he said, if he catches COVID, he's going to be very, very sick because he doesn't have an immune system right now. He was incredibly sick. And so I got really nervous about sending him back to school without a mask mandate. And I just felt like, Greg Abbott really wasn't protecting families like mine from our kids getting sick. So I slept that night and I could not sleep. And so the next day I said goodbye to my husband. He went to work. I said, bye, honey, see you later. And then I had one poster board left and I decided to go protest in front of the Capitol building. So I was trying to figure out what I was going to put on the poster board, and I decided to that I was so mad at Greg Abbott. I was like, Mothers Demand Action. I was like, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but I was a mother against Greg Abbott. So I wrote down Mothers Against Greg Abbott, one line in blue, one line in red, one line in blue, one line in red. And then I went and I stood in front of the Capitol for, approximately 2.5 hours. So I stood there holding that poster board and I took a photo and it went viral. And next thing I know, some folks started a Facebook group and it had a lot of followers. And I went in there, I said, well, that's me. So I kind of took over the Facebook group. And currently we have close to 63,000 members on our Facebook group.
That's amazing, and I that is a great story. I mean, we all have our COVID story in some particular manner. I mean, I had a former student, well, students who ended up passing away due to complications of COVID. I had a coworker who ended up passing away because of complications from COVID, and it really bothered me on a personal level that some were just kind of shaking it off as just like it's no big deal. And it's just, we have these stories, and that's a very personal one. And I'm sure you took offense to people just saying, it's no big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, we could do so little to save other lives. I didn't feel like it was asking too much.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about how you got politically active in, let's see, you started what, trying to get involved in the 2022 election here, and then kind of it morphed into more. Talk a little bit about that.
So we originally started, my protest was on August the 6th, 2021.
Mhm.
And so we're up on very close to our 4-year anniversary. And in the beginning, we didn't really kind of kick off the general pack until January of 2022. But that's pretty much kind of what kicked everything off. My background is in marketing and online strategy. So that kind of explains a few things. But what ended up happening was that I am really sick and tired of the way Democrat politics runs in Texas. I just really felt like they weren't fighting for the little people. They weren't fighting for the right things. I feel like families in Texas have lost a lot of their say on what happens in the state. So I just decided to organize and fight back the way only a mom can by producing really good ads and messaging that does push back on the politicians and reminds them that they can't get away with everything. So that's really been my philosophy from the very, very beginning. I don't know about you, but every single political cycle, when some political commercials go on TV, I want to throw canned foods at the TV. I get so frustrated. I'm just like, that ad did not speak to me. That was terrible. So what we did was we got a group of people together from the film industry in Texas, all over Texas, and we just decided to put together the ads that we would like to see on TV instead of letting other people in DC or other areas of the United States talk for us. We can talk for us. So we decided to produce some ads on our own and just fight back on our own.
That is awesome. I have seen some of your ads. They are very creative and I don't want to say funny, but they're clever and
Yeah.
so yeah, so let's talk. Let's just kind of go further with that. I think like does what did you make of of your outcomes of the 2022 election? Were you somewhat satisfied? Were you just completely just distraught? I mean, what were your feelings from that midterm leading into the presidential and where you are now?
Okay, so in 22, we were a little bit disappointed in so many ways because we really felt like we had so many amazing candidates, and we did. I mean, that team that was running for all the state offices, they were amazing, amazing. Were we surprised at the results? No, no, we were not. Because we saw what was happening on the ground. We
Mhm.
were knocking on doors, we were talking to people, we saw what was happening on the ground. So I was not surprised at the results, but I really thought that one person would have broken through, but to see no one break through in 22 was just heartbreaking, to tell you the truth. And but I felt like, okay, well, we didn't really lose much ground in 22, but we did lose ground in 24, and that was a real eye opener in 24, more so than 22. 22, meaning I just kind of was hoping that someone would have broken through and nobody did, and that was disappointing. Mostly because I really felt like there was a lot of tribalism in Texas. I mean, people are just like they vote along tribes, and I think that I thought better of people in 22. It was very naively thinking better of people, that they would vote for the person that was like the most qualified for the job. So if you have a bunch of people lined up with resumes and you look at the resumes and you interview them and you ask them questions, who is better for this job? I thought people would have chosen the better one for the job. And looking back, I mean, that was really naive thinking, when the real problems that we have in Texas are gerrymandering, a lot of people, with a lot of non-voters. We don't really sit down and have a deep look at non-voters and ask them why they don't go vote. And we have a lot of people that are disenfranchised voters here in Texas. So I think that sooner or later, all of this is going to come back. And, we know how it haunts Democrats, but it's going to come back and it's going to haunt Republicans too. They are not immune to the structure that they have built in Texas. They're not immune. Sooner or later, it's going to bite them as well. So I'm just kind of like in the point of like waiting it off, hoping that people will start catching on that the Republican Party isn't really fighting for Texans. And I'm kind of hoping that, through education, through reaching out to our neighbors, through some organic, conversations that we can have with one another, that we can change things in Texas. So I'm still optimistic that
Mhm.
this can happen. So here's
Yeah.
hoping that it happens in 2026. And our goal, really should be, we need to have a goal of a project plan towards 2030.
Mhm.
So we need to have some goals for this year, 28 and 2030, and we need to start working together as a team of Democrats.
Yeah. What did you make? Before I get into that, that was a really good point. Having a plan and doing that. I mean, that's one of the big things when we look back at how Texas changed. I mean, that was a big attribute that Republicans had going all the way back to, the 1960s and 70s. So it didn't, things didn't happen overnight. You have to plan things. And, that's a really good point that I think you made there, is to make a plan and build on it, keep to it. And I think that's a great point. I also want to ask you here about this last legislative session in Texas politics. On a scale of like A to F, I think this was like an F minus session for the entire state. That's just
It was
me.
horrible.
What letter grade, what rating would you give this, and why do you think that way?
I would probably give it a, I don't know, a G. No, I'm joking. It was so bad.
I like that.
It was beyond bad. It was horrific. It really, really was. Every day was a new nightmare. And it was incredibly, it was, you felt so disillusioned by the whole entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, not every average people don't really pay much attention to the state legislature anyway. But I think it's interesting that a lot of the things that were done here, and the biggest thing was the school voucher bill that comes through. And of course, they say it won't take effect till 2026. Um, I'm not quite sure what that means from now until then when it comes to education budgets. I guess they're going to have to make their own little savings accounts, but because it's just going to be, you know, cutting and cutting and cutting. But I'm of the mind that you can use that against several of these incumbents going into 2026. I mean, you know, Dan Patrick, our lieutenant governor, is going to run again. I'm sure Abbott's going to run again. I think he may have already announced that he is. Going to have a new controller and a new attorney general. These are going to be some open seat races here that I think y'all will have a very good influence in trying to, sway as to how that who those candidates can be, and how they can shape themselves in the general election. What do you think? What do you make of that?
I think we have a lot of opportunities as Democrats in the 26th cycle, and I hope that we fully engage and take advantage of all of those opportunities. From the open seats to the fact that Dan Patrick really stuck his foot in his mouth multiple times this session, and to the reality is that Dan Patrick achieved something that he's been wanting to achieve since he originally came into office. He really likes power, and he has more power in Texas than the governor of Texas. And we have a little bit of a battle of wills. It was definitely there on the THC ban, a battle between Greg Abbott and Dan Patrick. So who's the real governor of Texas? Was it going to be Dan Patrick or was it going to be Greg Abbott? I mean, Greg Abbott sort of won in the end because he vetoed that bill, but he vetoed it in such a way that it still opens it up for the special session that is coming up and entertains some tweaks to the language of the bill for this special session. So who knows what is going to happen at the end of the day? But I really feel like what we see is buyer beware. I want to say buyer beware because we saw Dan Patrick when he first came into office really had a problem with the LGBTQ and the trans community, and it's taken him what 12 years to completely dismantle that community, and now he has a problem with the THC community and anybody who takes those particular like drugs, and so he has a problem with them, and sooner or later he's going to find something that you support. I mean, he tends to find those issues and just beats them down until he gets his way, and so sooner or later Dan Patrick is going to be against something that you don't want him to be against. I mean, that's just the way it is. He likes his power. He likes waging over power with Greg Abbott, and really the big winner in this past legislative session was the fact that Dan Patrick was involved in both chambers, both the House and in the Senate. He basically was in charge, and that was the travesty of it all.
No. Just to follow up with that, the Democrats in the House had a new caucus chair in Gene Wu. Um, I've been openly critical about that to the audience that I have here is about what he did throughout this entire session. What do you make of the party out of power and in that House chamber? You know, did they do the best that they could? Was there more for them to do? What do you make of their attempt to try to stop some of these bad bills?
I think it kind of the session got off on a bad start from
Hmm.
the very beginning when they voted in Dustin Burrows. That was really the problem. I think that I like Gene Wu. I was supportive of Gene Wu. I liked
Hmm.
him. He had his moments where I just felt like he could have been stronger in pulling the caucus together. I think at the end of the session, we saw people leaving the caucus um, because they wanted to separate from Gene Wu. So we have a lot of problems with the Democrats being in disarray and not getting in line with the Democratic platform and the Democratic caucus, and
Hmm.
that's a shame. Some of it I think that Gene Wu could have done a better job on, but I also think that he did the best job he could considering some strong personalities, and that a lot of these people really did sell their soul to the Republican devil.
Yeah. They, there was even a few Democrats at the very beginning of this session who gave nomination speeches for Dustin Burrows to say, we're going to work with him and all this stuff. I'm like, Gene Wu did an interview with the Texas Observer and said things like, well, we were lied to. Well, give us an example. I won't. Okay. Uh, it's I mean, I'm right there with you. I was very hopeful that he's a forceful person. He's got a good personality about lawmaking, and he gets very passionate about things. But it just kind of felt like it was a bit of a whimper there at the end, and he's just standing there saying, "Well, I mean, I did what I could," but we're going, "Wait a second, did you really?" So.
I just felt like there could have been some strategies in their pocket that they should have just tried and used. I mean, just like burn it all down, do
Hmm.
something,
Yeah.
And I think that we saw this going on in DC and in Texas here in Austin, and it was super frustrating. It's been a frustrating 6 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm it, and then we hear about, this, the Senate race, and that, John Cornyn, our senior senator, is going to be challenged, is challenged by the Attorney General Ken Paxton. And my gosh, you talk about an albatross of problems that this guy has. And it looks like if he'll probably beat John Cornyn. I have a feeling he's going to be the Republican nominee. And we have a couple of people who are, the Democrats have an accountant, I think, out of Houston. I forget his name. And then Colin Allred's back in this again. Um, you know, okay. I don't get very excited about Colin Allred. He seems like a nice guy. Seems like he is a, smart guy. I, what do you make of that?
Well, have you read any of my columns lately about
I actually have. I actually want you to talk about that.
Okay, I just want to make that clear right
Yes,
away.
yes.
First of all, I want to say something. In 21, when we first started, and in 22, I saw Colin Allred speak at some events, and I thought he was great. He had a really strong backing from the Young Democrats, and he was just this really young, charming guy in the room, and he seemed like he had a lot of potential to go up against Ted Cruz. So when he announced, I was actually really excited. So this he announced, I think, in like March or April. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna wait and see if he contacts us by the beginning of June. The beginning of June came by, we didn't hear from him. August came by, we didn't hear from him. October came by, we didn't hear from him. But then, Roland Gutierrez got in the race. So Roland Gutierrez contacted us right away. And so we were like, okay, let's go. Let's hear what from Roland. So we started supporting Roland on the ground, also because we saw how hard Roland fought in the
Yeah.
88 ledge. And so we thought, okay, we'll just kind of support Roland. But of course, in that primary, Roland lost to Colin. So after the primary, we reached out to Colin Allred several times. We asked him to attend our event at the Texas Democratic Convention. We had over 500 people there. We had, well over 75 candidates that
Mhm.
came up and spoke and introduced themselves. It was quite the party. It was the biggest party of the night. And Colin was nowhere to be found. So we did contact his team. They sent a surrogate who showed up as we were packing up the party.
Oof.
Like everybody was gone.
Oh my goodness.
And he showed up and he was able to get some guacamole and a drink, and that was it. It's like, here's a margarita, here's some guacamole. Welcome to the end of the party. Thanks
Oh,
for showing up.
oh my
Glad
goodness.
you're here. This hurts.
Hmm.
But I really felt like it was incredibly disrespectful to not show up to a party on the largest group of Texas women in the entire state and to not show up at their event. I just thought it was incredibly insulting. So then we also sponsored a young youth event, and he didn't show up to that either. We also invited him to do a webinar with us. He never returned any phone calls, never returned any emails. And we really just felt like he turned his back on us.
Yeah.
And then we saw that in his lackluster campaign. He was nowhere. Whereas Colin was a game. He
Mhm.
was nowhere to be found on the campaign trail. We could not find yard signs with his name on them. And we didn't know where he was. So when he announced earlier this week, I was like, no,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to speak up against this. The answer is no, mostly because I know that there are other people that are about to announce. I mean, Terry Virts is the astronaut in Houston. He announced, Colin already announced. Terry Virts is a nice guy. He's really great. He knows how to speak in public. He has a lot of really positive characteristics and positive things going for his campaign. I think he's great. But we also have, Joaquin Castro, who's probably about to announce, James Tallarico, who's the Texas House rep, who's about to announce, and maybe Beto O'Rourke, who's about to announce. So in our opinion, we felt like we have other candidates to choose from. We don't need to put all of our eggs in like the Colin Allred basket this
Yeah.
round. So we're not going to. The sooner the Colin Allred campaign ends, the better, because it just takes away money from candidates that are feasible.
Yeah, absolutely. I always felt that, I try not to trash anybody here, but I always felt that All Red was robotic. And for him to do those types of things your to your group, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's atrocious and bad candidate 101 right there. I mean, that's just terrible. I mean, you go where the people are, and when you're invited, you go. I mean, come on. I mean, but I don't know. Obviously, they had a different plan, and well, we knew what happened with that sort of strategy. Is there anybody in there that is about to announce, or that just those names that you mentioned that you might think you would initially off the top of your head may at this very moment say, I like that person. I may want to support that person.
Um, I'm gonna be totally honest. I think James Tallarico and Joaquin Castro are both incredibly strong candidates.
Hmm.
I like both of them a whole lot. I think that they have a lot of things going for them. Um, I would like okay, I love Beto O'Rourke. He's campaigned all over the state of Texas.
Sure.
He's given his heart and soul to the state. This man deserves to win. Okay, he deserves to run for an office and win. I just want to see if we can turn any of the any of the wins in 26, because this man needs to have the wind at his back. He does not need to be going into a headwind.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
So
perfect sense.
I feel like if we run him into a headwind and he loses again, I don't want to feel that again,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. Like I don't want him to feel that again. I feel sort of this like maternal protection over Beto O'Rourke. I want him to feel like a winner. I want him to have that euphoria feeling like he won something. I think that a lot of things are up in the air on what can happen in 26 right now. So I sort of feel like, okay, Beto, why don't you stand back, work with mothers, work with other people. Let's build up the candidates. Let's work on the messaging. Let's figure out how we can strategically run into the headwinds. And then in 28 or 30, you run again.
Yeah.
But we hopefully run with the wind on your back because this man works so hard for Texas and he deserves to win.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know of any other statewide candidate who has gone to every single county, when rooms are bigger than the county that he may have just visited. And you're exactly right. I mean, he's a hardworking candidate, and you just have that feeling for him. I mean, he doesn't have to work hard on name recognition. People know the name. It's just trying to get people convinced to vote for him. And I think you're right. Having the wins behind him, not have him go in the headwinds. That makes perfect sense. I think that's fantastic. Um, Talk to me about what you think is a failure at the Democratic Texas Democratic Party apparatus that you think that they should probably listen to you on, or that you that they need to vastly improve on.
I think um
Take
to
as
be
much time as you need.
okay. First of all, I think they're on the right track. I think Kendall Scudder is doing a great job of like taking over the Texas Democratic Party. I think the biggest hindrance right now in the Texas Democratic Party is that they have a huge debt. They were run really badly by the previous chairman and the previous executive director, Monique Olica. They really ran the TDP into the ground. They ran it into the ground, and now the TDP is saddling, a $500,000 worth of debt that they have to repay. So there is that, and that is shocking and true. And then we see, Kendall Scudder working his tail off, doing call time, reaching out to donors, reaching out to voters and precinct chairs and, county party chairs, trying to fill the county party chair seats, trying to fill the precinct chair seats, trying to repay that humongous debt. He is working incredibly hard and deserves all of our hope, all of our work, and all of our respect. So I think that they're on the way back up because I see someone at the head of the party right now who's doing a great job.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think he's doing a great job. And I really have a lot of respect for him. Now, as for the party, what they need to be doing right now to move bigger, faster, like smarter, is well, I just said it. They need to move faster.
Mhm.
They need to do a complete rebranding. They need to update their website. They need to work with candidates and build a ground game of volunteers that show up in their offices and do call time and support, whatever like the campaigns are for the coordinated campaign. They need to have a big issue on strategically what the campaigns look like. The strategy is that we shouldn't be running just one person who is in charge of doing all the fundraising for the entire state of Texas and one person who is charismatic. We need to think about getting several charismatic people to run for office and lifting each other up and helping each other on the ground, raise the money and do the groundswell.
Mhm.
So we have to hang up the ideal that all of this like the momentum runs behind one person, which is like in the past would have been like a Wendy Davis or a Beto O'Rourke or even a Colin Allred. I think that's a lot of pressure for those campaigns. But if we get a team of candidates that are running for office that are, inspirational and dynamic and can rally the people that they would represent locally, and we get that momentum and that groundswell and we move it up the chain, I think that it's going to completely rebuild the Democratic Party here in Texas. So there is that. I do feel like the Democratic Party needs to restructure their messaging. So our messaging right now, we have a gift horse, and our messaging right now needs to be on the pain points of everyday Texans.
Mhm.
So we need to run on Democratic populist messaging. I mean, even if you ran a campaign on like three issues, public education, legalizing THC, and raising the minimum wage. Like,
Yeah.
let's just do three winning issues that say, we want to take care of Texans. We want you to afford housing and have a place where you dream of living in forever, where you can make a living, and we want you to have all those things. We want you to have the Texan or American dream. So we you deserve that. You deserve health care. You deserve support. You deserve a hospital that is close by. You deserve those things. Those are just like things that you are born with and you will deserve naturally. We deserve not to criminalize people for, THC and gummies if they help people,
Mhm.
out with their health or other things. Also, we have to think of the criminal system, and we deserve not to send people to jail for silly offenses like that are
Mhm.
just so minor, and they get these, 10-year terms, 12-year terms in prison for something that is so minor. That those things need to change. And I think that we can run on those things, running on public school. We deserve to keep our public schools open in rural Texas,
Yep.
in our cities. I live in Austin. Several of our schools are going to be closing down in Austin. We pay incredibly high taxes. 43% of all the money that we pay for ISD taxes goes into recapture.
Yeah.
It is crazy. It's over for our family. It's close to $4,500 that we pay into AIC taxes goes into recapture. And
Mhm.
the recapture money doesn't go into, you would think it would go into like rural Texas schools or, smaller school districts. No, recapture money from AISD goes into charter schools. Not everybody knows that.
Yeah. Right. Right.
We're not asking the questions as to like where the money goes to. We also have a lot of Republicans that are saying we need to lower the property taxes. We need to do this. Well, here's the realistic thing is that we cannot lower property taxes unless the state of Texas actually pays their fair share. We cannot lower it
Yeah.
without them paying their fair share of municipal taxes and city taxes and school taxes and
Mhm.
just things like healthcare and stuff. They go to Austin, they pass bills that require cities and counties have new laws that pass that requires them to do different things, but then they don't fund the cities and counties for those requirements.
Yep.
Those are all problems. But when we think about property taxes, these are the taxes that we pay for, that we see every day. So I just want to say these are the ones that pay for our police to show up at our house, our firemen to show up when a house is burning down, fill in the potholes, our public schools, making sure our kids go to public schools. These are the taxes that we see and feel every single day. And so to have those go away would, it's a libertarian wet dream, but who do you think is going to be the first people to complain when there's a pothole in the street or the fireman doesn't show up and their house is on fire? It's going to be the libertarians. Okay?
Mhm.
They everything sounds great in their like wet dream of what they want, but in reality, when you implement it, people are going to die. They're not going to get the services that they expect to get, and then they're going to be mad.
Yeah.
So we just need to rethink how we talk about property taxes and how we think about property taxes. And if we really want property taxes to be lowered, we need to demand that our state legislature pays their fair share.
That's a great point. And I saw that what you mentioned earlier was, I don't you can share this if you like. I mean, you went to a like some sort of a convention meeting about marketing, and as you were talking there about populist things, raise the minimum wage, let that be part of that, let that be your winning message. I think that is fantastic, in the fact that these guys will not like that I've said this, but Dan Patrick is a right-wing populist. President Trump is a right-wing populist. These are populist things, and so why why not the other side do something just of the same strategy? Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, these are the real kitchen table issues that everyday families like mine care about the most.
Hmm.
These are the real issues. So we should run on those issues that impact real Texans the most and find a way for it to be relatable. I mean, they have been so busy putting Texans in boxes and making us feel like we're separated and we don't have the same common values.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that many Democrats that don't eat their meals with their family. We all do it. We
Yeah.
all eat, me, my family, we eat almost all of our meals together. We eat
Hmm.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all of us together. We're always together. And so it's just kind of ridiculous for one party to assume that the other party is that different from them. We're really, at the end of the day, we're really not that different.
Exactly. Just have a different vision about different issues. That's it. So, Nancy, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. I appreciate your passion and your dedication to this cause and to all of your causes. I do want to say, before we get out of here, is that you had an ad recently that really made me laugh. It was like, it's entitled "The Last Condom." And do you mind to speak about that? Because that took rather genius to put that very issue in a more of a comedic manner, and very relatable. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, I think that almost all of our ads to a certain point are kind of funny and they definitely have a hook and a punch. And then you'll laugh at something and you're like, why did I just laugh at that? That was actually kind of dark humor? So we tend to have a style, and our style is to create like a gut punch, something that you kind of laugh at, and then you just go, oh my God, yeah, this is where we're going. And the dark humor of it all. And then to just sit back and reflect on it and then realize that that really is the direction we're going, that it just seems so outrageous, but this is really the direction we're going. So the last condom on earth was really just to highlight the fact that we're going in such a direction and in such an extreme direction that we're taking um reproductive rights away from women. But where does it stop? What happens when the reproductive rights are taken away from men and boys? I mean, are we going to have, all boys in an attic one day looking at like the mystical condom? in their attic going, wow, what is this? Oh, was this before everybody got pregnant? Was this before everybody had STDs?
Mhm.
That sort of thing. Yeah. And we really need men and women to come together on this and realize that reproductive rights is both of our issues. It isn't just a women's issue.
Absolutely. That is a great way to end here. I again, that is a brilliant. I mean, y'all do a lot of brilliant ads, a lot of brilliant videos. I think you hit the nail on the head. Dark humor, and I'm all for it. So, Nancy, thank you so much for being here. Uh, just to end here, let the audience know where they can find you, how they can possibly donate to you, if you don't mind letting them know that bit of information.
Wonderful. So you can always go to our website. It is mothersagainstgregabbott.com. We have several ways to donate on the website. And if you can't donate, maybe you want a great t-shirt or yard sign. We have a really fabulous store with some amazing swag that is kind of fun. And I have to say, I think that our swag is the best. Our merch is just awesome in our store. And it's again, I mean, sometimes we have things with humor on it. Sometimes we have, you know, uh, some sayings that are kind of fun and are unique and are our own. So please go up there and shop if you can't donate. And then also just look for us on every single social media platform, from Substack to Twitter X to Facebook, to Instagram to TikTok. We are everywhere. And so just follow along.
All right, Nancy, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
And thank you, Nancy. That was a fantastic interview. Thanks for being on there. Definitely appreciate your time. Go find her on those social media places and subscribe to her Substack. It is worth mentioning in terms of transparency, I did donate to Moms for Democracy PAC. It was a $10 donation. Big spender over here. To their cause, and you can find that on the TEC report. And folks, that's all from me for this episode. Be sure to share this episode with your friends. Invite them to subscribe to The Outsider on Substack. Also, be sure to tell your friends to find The Outsider podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and on YouTube. To be sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up with all the new episodes. And folks, I always appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again very soon.